Athena had already drawn her conclusions before I finished drawing mine. That is what separates her from the rest of Olympus. She does not react to events. She processes them as they occur, the way a general reads terrain before the army arrives. By the time Zeus had corrected my test and the cosmic balance had returned to its established measure, Athena had already determined what the test revealed, what my silence afterward meant, and what the space between my action and my next move would require. She sent the dream that same night. I do not dream often. The underworld does not generate them. Dreams belong to the living, to minds that need the dark hours to sort what the waking hours accumulate. When something reaches me in sleep, I notice. When something reaches me with this level of precision, I study every detail. The board was vast, not a physical object, more like a principle made visible, a surface onto which the arrangement of power had been projected in a form that could be examined. The sky above it was wrong, in the specific way my test had been wrong. Not broken, not storming, just fractionally misaligned. Constellations shifted by degrees too small for an inattentive eye. Anyone who did not know the correct positions would have seen nothing. I knew the correct positions. An owl sat at the center of the board. Placed, not arrived. The distinction was clear. Every square around it held a piece of some kind. Forces of various weight arranged in a pattern that was not random. I read the arrangement the way I read my kingdom's intake records, looking for what the pattern revealed, rather than what it displayed. One square was empty, king-shaped, the space designed for the largest piece on the board, and that piece was conspicuously, deliberately absent. Not missing, not taken, but withheld. The empty square was the message. Someone had looked at the board and chosen not to place the most visible piece. Then the sky moved, not dramatically, not the way it moves in war or catastrophe. A single star shifted, slid slightly from its position with a smoothness that suggested intention rather than drift. I watched it, waiting for the correction that I knew would come from above, from the same reflex that had corrected my test within minutes. The correction came, but it moved in the wrong direction, not the star's original position, a new one, adjacent to where it had been, close enough that the correction appeared successful to anything monitoring the overall balance, but different enough that someone watching with full attention would know the sky had not returned to what it was. It had been adjusted to a position it had never occupied before. The sky had corrected itself into something slightly new. I came out of the dream fully awake, and I sat in the stillness of my throne room until I understood every layer of what had been sent to me. This was not Poseidon. Poseidon moves from appetite. He sees instability and calculates what portion of it might be converted into advancement. His interest in the fracturing of Zeus's authority is genuine, but it is personal, rooted in grievance, in the ledger he has been keeping since the lots were drawn. A god moving from appetite is legible, predictable in direction, even when unpredictable in timing. What reached me through that dream moved from something different, something several steps removed from personal gain, operating at the level of structural outcome rather than individual acquisition. It was not asking what the shift would provide, it was asking what the shift would produce. That is a different kind of intelligence, and a more dangerous one, because it is harder to anticipate and harder to deflect. Athena had watched my test. She had read the response time, the effortlessness of Zeus's correction, the absence of any message, the same data I had read, reaching the same conclusions. And she had reached out not to offer a transaction, but to deposit a piece of information precisely calibrated to what I needed to understand next. I decided to answer. The channel I used was old, older than the current arrangement of realms, a pathway between deep thought and deep thought, that predates the organization of Olympus entirely. It carries nothing substantial, only impression. The quality of understanding without its language. I sent back the same board. The owl unmoved. The empty king square still empty. But at the edge of the board, in a corner that had been vacant in her version, I placed one piece. Small, deliberate. At the margin, not the center. Acknowledgement, presence. Nothing more than that, and nothing less. Zeus felt something, not the exchange. I am certain he did not intercept the transmission itself. It was too quiet, too old, too far below the frequency of what he monitors. What he felt was the atmospheric consequence, the subtle pressure shift that surrounds any meaningful rearrangement of intention among gods. Not an alarm, not a signal he could name. More like the sensation of entering a room where the air has recently changed. Everything appears identical, but something in it carries the memory of a movement. He would catalog it, file it against future data. Zeus does not panic at ambiguity. He accumulates it patiently and resolves it when the pattern clarifies. He is very good at this. He has been doing it since before the Titan War ended. The pattern would not clarify quickly. That was partly the point. She came to the boundary of my realm at the hour when the distinction between worlds is thinnest. She did not cross it. She stood at the edge, which was both courtesy and a precise statement about the nature of what this was. Not a visit. A meeting at a border. On equal ground, in the sense that neither of us stood on the other's territory. I went to the boundary. We looked at each other across it, and neither of us spoke immediately, because neither of us needed to fill the silence, and both of us understood that the first words would set the register for everything that followed. You waited, I said. So did you. A moment of quiet that had content in it. The test was too visible, she said. Flat, not unkind. An assessment delivered with the efficiency of someone who has no interest in softening accurate information. I needed to measure his response time. You have it now. Yes. She looked at my kingdom the way I imagine she looks at everything. Not with desire, not with judgment, but with the specific attention of a mind that is always constructing a more complete model of whatever it examines. When she looked back at me, the examination was finished, and she had moved on to the next thing. I am not here to offer you an alliance, she said. I know. An alliance requires agreement. Agreement requires disclosure. Disclosure creates exposure. She let that sit for exactly the right amount of time. What I am offering is alignment. We do not need the same goal. We need compatible movement in a shared direction, for as long as that direction serves what each of us requires. Nothing formal, nothing visible, nothing that can be named. I considered the architecture of it. An alliance between the god of the underworld and the goddess of strategic wisdom would eventually become visible, identifiable, nameable, something Zeus could recognize and respond to as a unified front. What she was describing was fundamentally different. Two gods moving independently toward outcomes that happened to produce the same structural result. Not a conspiracy, a convergence. No agreement to discover, because no agreement had been made. He will see pieces, I said. He will not see the board. Something moved at the edge of her expression. Agreement, stripped of any quality that might be mistaken for warmth. Zeus is strongest when the threat is singular, she said. When he can bring full attention to a single pressure, he is almost impossible to move. You proved that in episode 5. She did not say your test failed. She said what was true. He is weakest when attention must divide. When pressures arrive from directions that appear unrelated, when the sources cannot be connected to a common cause, the response system fractures. He cannot be everywhere at once. No god can. and he has built his authority around never having to be. I saw the full shape of it then. Not just the board from the dream, but the board beneath the dream. The actual arrangement of forces, the actual empty squares, the actual pieces that had been sitting in position for years without being played. Poseidon, I said, has his own accounting, she said, and his own timeline, which you have also considered. She did not answer, which was its own answer. She stepped back from the boundary without ceremony and was no longer present, the way a conclusion is no longer present once the mind has absorbed it and moved forward. I returned to my throne room and remained there for a long time. Zeus is strongest when he reacts alone. I turned this over until every surface of it was clear. His correction of my test had been effortless because it was singular. One source, one direction, one response required. The system he had built over his entire reign was optimized for exactly that. Centralized, fast, overwhelming in its response to an identified threat. It had never needed to be otherwise. He had ruled Olympus for so long, without serious challenge, that the architecture of his authority had been built around the assumption of singular threat. The assumption had been safe. The challenges had always been singular. The Titans, the occasional rebellion, my test, one thing at a time. I thought about Poseidon, who has been measuring what he is owed against what he has been given for as long as the lots have been drawn, and who is not moved because the moment has not been right, and who will not wait forever. I thought about the fractures in Olympus that I had been watching from Bel. Ow. The gods who file and wait, who have their own private accounting, who have accepted the current arrangement not because they believe in it, but because they have not yet seen an alternative that was worth the cost. I thought about a star that corrected into a position it had never occupied before, and a king piece that was never placed, and an owl at the center of a board who had chosen patience so long it had become indistinguishable from power. The sky had not moved, but something inside Olympus had, quietly, without announcement, in the space between two gods standing at a boundary neither of them crossed. Zeus had spent his reign controlling the sky. He had never needed to control Olympus. That distinction was about to matter.